Hello, everybody from Venice in Italy. I've been here for a day and a bit speaking of the state of global affairs and the impact of the Trump administration on global politics and on Europe-U.S. Relations. And the backdrop to this meeting is an extraordinary set of events the last couple of weeks, starting from the Trump-Putin call on Ukraine, the beginnings of a peace process in Ukraine without European or Ukrainian participation, the J.D. Vance speech in Munich, the Zelensky visit to Washington, and the scenes that came out of the White House of criticism, questioning of Zelensky and of the conduct of the war. I mean, sort of a very extraordinary set of developments that, in fact, hurt the transatlantic relationship quite significantly. And then, of course, the European reaction to many of these. Now, I think it's important to point out that in order to understand U.S. foreign policy under this administration, one needs to comprehend three fundamental goals that they seem to have, and they're, in fact, to some extent in collision with one another. The first is very clearly China, China, China. So this is about competition with China on a whole range of fronts. This is the peer competitor of the U.S., the most significant geopolitical challenger that the U.S. Thinks it has in the world. So this is conditioning, decisions around Panama, Greenland, tariffs. It's very hard to understand U.S. foreign policy today if you don't do it through a China lens. The second, clearly, is about nationalism and illiberalism and the forwarding of this ideological agenda globally. So, the departure of the U.S. from the multilateral ecosystem, the defunding of the UN, the undoing of part of the trading architecture, its questioning of alliances, its criticism of the EU as a liberal project. All of these things are part of this broader illiberal agenda. And then the third, very clearly, and this might be counterintuitive because the administration is always speaking from a apparent position of strength, is in fact a perception of American weakness and of the fragility of American power. And this is very present on discussions around the budget, the need to cut the budget deficit, the overstretch of America, that America's funding wars around the world, that is supporting allies that are not supporting it. The discourse around the Ukraine conflict, in fact, is very much infused by this idea of weakness. This is a war that we're losing, that is unwinnable, things like that. No, this is the discourse of a power that is very much worried about its own capacity to sustain its influence abroad. Now, these three objectives are in collision with one another. It's very hard for the U.S. to forward all of these at the same time. If it pushes the China narrative too hard, then it better forget about retrenchment and reducing costs, because it's going to mean collision and conflict for quite some time. If it pushes the illiberal agenda, nationalist agenda too far, then it will probably lose a bunch of allies in the process, starting from the Europeans that feel that this is a direct threat to their model and core elements of European sort of cohesion. And then if it forwards the idea of retrenchment and cost-cutting on others, then it clearly loses its ability to both forward a nationalistic agenda and contain China. So there seems to be a very fundamental incoherence, contradiction within the Trump foreign policy agenda that will play out before our eyes in the coming weeks and months. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye-bye.